I broke up with my girlfriend, Allison, about 6 months ago. I really cared about her, but I found out she was cheating on me with some guy. Not gonna lie, it hurt pretty bad at first, but that was quickly replaced by rage. That kind of rage that ceases to be an emotion, but rather becomes a living, breathing entity. It didn't help that she immediately broke down and tried to play the victim, especially when I found out the dude had been hooking her up with drugs. It was beyond insulting. She had zero right to play the whole injured party card. Sorry, sweetie, not gonna work. When she realized that, she tried to get angry and yelling and calling me every name in the book. Who are you to judge me? She kept screaming, over and over. At this point, I think her attitude was more appalling than the actual cheating. It was like seeing a child throwing a tantrum in the middle of the mall. Allison even managed to do the same, stomping up and down. I had to admit, I found it funny. I just turned around, walked out of her apartment, and didn't look back. As I was driving away, I saw her run out of the apartment and tried to race down my car. I kept driving, not sparing her a glance. Right on cue, the non-stop calls and texts started coming later that night. You all know the ones I mean. First, there are the ones frantically apologizing and begging for your forgiveness. Sometimes there are ones that try to act all nonchalant and ask about your day in life, as if nothing had ever happened. Then comes the anger-laced ones that try to act all tough and insult everything about you. If you are a guy, there is almost guaranteed to be a shot at your masculinity. For the ladies, a shot at your appearance with a passing reference to some other girl they've had their eye on will be the weapon of choice. A bit of gaslighting usually comes about here. The offending phrase is usually something like, "Why are you being so mean to me?" Or "You are being very immature." Any sort of message rant like this usually ends with something like, "Fine. If you're gonna be like that, I don't need you anyways. Insert rebound's name here is so much hotter anyways." But my personal favorite is when they send you a late night text, usually between 1 and 3 a.m., that goes along the lines of, "I really miss you." The kind that is designed to tug at your heart just enough to get your attention and lure you into talking, but nothing that requires an actual apology. I can't even tell you how many times she messaged or called me before I blocked her. It was almost like seeing a mental patient off their meds. Of all the girlfriends I have broken up with, Allison put in more effort than all the others combined. It was kind of stunning. She was a huge fan of alternating between "I miss you" and "I will burn your house down" depending on the moment. Needless to say, I didn't answer or respond to anything Allison said. I didn't block her immediately because I gotta admit, it was hilarious watching her go to pieces after she cheated on me. But like most sane people, I got tired of it and blocked her number, email, all that good stuff. I went on with my life and everything was good. In January, I started getting these weird emails. At first, they were just like simple stuff. The email address was one I didn't recognize. "Hey, how are you?" Then came the weirdest of all. "Do you have a girlfriend?" I thought it was just spam, so I marked it and didn't give it a second thought. Then, the text messages came. "Good morning, Vince. If you're enjoying this video, please subscribe to our channel and leave a like. Let's continue. How is work going? What did you have for lunch?" I was confused to who this, not to mention a bit suspicious out, so I didn't answer. But my phone dinged to indicate the same number messaged me again. "Did you miss her?" There was a picture attached, along with a smiling emoticon. Just guess who it was. Allison. Same long blonde hair, green eyes, and wide smile. What a shocker. She made that email account to message me and got a new phone. I had put all of this behind me and here she was back. Unbelievable. Girl had major issues. At that moment, the rage returned and I messaged back. "You cheated on me and now can't leave me alone? Bye. Don't you dare try to contact me again or you will be sorry." I blocked the number and thought that would be the end of it. Coming home from work about a week later, I was walking back home when I got a phone call. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Arlington. Sweet lady. We lived in a new duplex and I really felt comfortable there. She treated me like a son and I won't lie. She was like another mom to me. I would help her with anything she needed around the house and occasionally she would cook for me. Best apple pie you've ever had. Not to mention she was very supportive when I broke up with Allison. Hey, Mrs. Arlington, what's up? Vince, are you at home? She sounded concerned. No. Why do you ask? Because I keep hearing noises from your place. Sounds like someone is inside. I swear I can hear laughter. A woman's laughter. My entire body went numb at this. I'm calling the police. Don't worry about doing anything, unless someone tries to break into your place. Okay, my boy, she sounded simultaneously relieved and tense. As soon as hung up with Mrs. Arlington, I called the cops and told them someone broke into my place and my neighbor heard it. I gave them the address and they said they would be there immediately. Then I called Mrs. Arlington back. I told her the cops were coming and to watch the door to my place. Very slowly, I continued walking to my duplex. I stayed on the phone with her until the police arrived, which didn't take too long. The officers kept watch until I arrived. Mrs. Arlington was there, all concerned. I have never been more grateful to have her as a neighbor. Neither she nor the cops saw anyone try to leave. They searched the place, but found nothing had been broken or anything. Now it was my turn to look. I didn't see anything had been stolen. That bothered me more than anything. To know someone had been there for seemingly no purpose, no valuables taken, nothing trashed, just ... a silent presence. A laughing presence apparently. Usually being home made me feel content, peaceful. Now it just made me feel tense. I made sure to thank Mrs. Arlington for keeping an eye out and everything. Just as the cops were about to leave, one of them spoke up. Is that yours, Officer Mansfield asked, his face contorted into an expression I couldn't quite read. Is what mine? I had no idea what he was talking about. That he said, pointing outside the back door onto the back porch. There, positioned right outside the porch, was some sort of rag doll. I wasn't sure what it was at first, but then I saw it looked a bit like me. It had the same blonde hair and brown eyes. The clothes looked like something I've worn many before, khakis pants and a polo shirt. The doll looked like it had seen better days. Then I realized it looked like it had been repeatedly stabbed or cut, because the stuffing was coming out of the body at parts. My legs felt like jelly at that moment, but that wasn't the worst part. The doll was hanging from the tree right next to our building, and it was hanging by what looked like the end of a noose. A very well made and realistic one. We all went outside and sure enough, the doll of me was hanging from a noose. It slowly swung back and forth in the wind, like some sort of disturbing wind chime or something. I ... don't really know if it's mine was all I could get out. I guess it is now. Mrs. Arlington patted me on the arm. You can stay with me tonight, Vince. I immediately accepted. That's very kind of you, Ma. There isn't much we can do about this, but keep an eye on things, and we will do the same. If you need us, we'll be here ASAP, Officer Mansfield said. Thank you, I will. With that, they left. I gave Mrs. Arlington a big hug and got my clothes and stuff. As I packed my bag, I couldn't help but feel like they were somehow tainted. I couldn't get out of there quick enough. So, here I am right now on Mrs. Arlington's couch. She's offered me her guest room for the night, or any other night I need it. I might just take her up on that as well. At this point, I have no idea what to expect. Update: hey guys. I just wanted to say I am overwhelmed by your support and reaction. I never expected to see anything remotely like this, and it means a lot to me. You all had some great advice, and I have contacted a lawyer, and have begun the process of filing a restraining order. My locks and stuff have all been changed. My cousin works in computers, and I called him up about searching for bugs or anything Allison might have put there. He came out that night, and we couldn't find anything. He also agreed to help set up a camera system around my place. I can't say that Allison was always like this, but looking back, she was always a bit unusual. That was actually what attracted me to her in the first place. She had this intensity about her, but then very slowly, I began to see things. I found out she was cheating on me like a lot of people do. It was a lot of small things at first, taking longer to respond to me when I texted. Her version of events would be all over the place, and she was talking to someone on the phone more and more, One night, I heard her talking to some guy on Skype when she thought I was sleeping, and well, that was it. Mrs. Arlington has agreed to go out of town for a little bit, and my friend John is staying with me. Thanks again, you guys, and if anything happens, I promise to let you all know. I've been staying at Mrs. Arlington's place for the past few days. As I mentioned, she went out of town for a bit. My best friend John has been here with me, and we've been sleeping in shifts. Not gonna lie, without him I would be a wreck. He used to be a bouncer at a club downtown, and now works as a personal trainer, so I know he can handle himself if he needs to. My cousin Eric helped us set up the system to monitor my building. When there is any movement occurring, either outside or within my part of the building, it automatically sends a notice to both my phone and John's. We can also watch a live stream of any camera. About 2 days ago, I had just gotten home when I got my mail. One piece of it was a plain, white envelope addressed to me. I opened the envelope, and the only thing inside was a single piece of paper. Next time, the version of you at the end of a rope won't be a doll. See you soon. I didn't recognize the writing. It was a real mess to read, a load of scribbles all jumbled together. Come to think of it, I don't think I have ever seen Allison's handwriting. I immediately checked the camera to see if it picked up anything, but nope, just the regular mail delivery guy. Last night, I had just gone to bed when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the security system. Immediately, I grabbed it and opened the live streaming function. The camera that had its senses tripped was the one located outside my part of the house's front door. Moving quickly, I grabbed the pistol I kept in the table beside the bed and put it right beside me. Although John helped set me up with it and practice, I had to use it before. I hoped this time would be no different. It was a quiet night out, the weather was clear and calm, so I clearly see what was going on outside. I called to John, and he came rushing to see what was going on. I held up my phone and he got the idea really quick. I had never been more nervous than when I looked at my phone to see what was going in. Allison, just standing there in front of the door. From the looks of it, I wasn't sure she had the slightest clue where she was. Allison looked like she was sleepwalking, or was higher than a kite. It was the eyes that gave it all away, unfocused, dilated, and just weird looking. Not gonna lie to you guys, it was a pretty freaky look. It also didn't help that I barely recognized her. Her hair was a greasy mess, her clothes looked like they had been shredded, and her previously beautiful olive skin looked almost gray. But that wasn't the worst part. At first, it looked like she was stroking a cat or something. Then I realized what it was. A teddy bear. An ordinary child's teddy bear. Apart from it being a bit worn and dirty, it was no different than the one you might get at the store. Weird. Then, I noticed something else. Not only was she stroking it like a pet, I realized that her lips were moving. No, there was no way. It couldn't be. Was she actually talking to it? Well, that was easy enough to figure out. The cameras were equipped with audio, so all I had to do was use the function and see for myself. After taking a deep breath, I switched on the sound. I didn't recognize the voice when I heard it. Allison always had the most beautiful voice, the kind that lured you in and made you want to listen all day. This person, it was like listening to Allison pretending to be a kid again. Hey there, Mr. Bear, what should I do? You wanted me to come here, told me so yourself. But what now? I left the doll just like you said. You told me if I was good you would give me something special. She kept walking around in circles, like she was waiting for something. Okay, I thought I was disturbed by the doll of me she left. This was some next level freak show right here. It was like she had totally lost it or something. I was hoping she was just coked or high out of her mind, because if she was sober ... You've been so good to me. You understood me when other people were mean to me, when he was so mean. So what do you want me to do? She lifted up the thing up and held it to her ear, like she was actually waiting for it to answer her. Hey man, the police are on their way, John suddenly said. I thought I heard him say something when I was watching the cameras. Good man. Now, I have known the guy for 10 years. and he used to work as a bouncer, so I know he doesn't scare easy. But when I looked up, the look on his face was something I will never forget. I nodded my head to show I heard him, but he too quickly resumed watching whatever it was Allison was doing. The whole thing didn't seem real. She moved so suddenly we both flinched. Now she was looking down at the bear with a wide smile, as if she had some great epiphany. "Thank you so much for helping me get rid of that mean guy, the one who came between me and Vince. When he sees how sorry I was and how I made things right, everything will be just as it was. We will all be one big happy family, and I owe it all to you." She swept the thing up in her arms and gave it a big hug. I couldn't watch it anymore. She had officially gone insane. I didn't even want to think about that mean guy she got rid of. Fortunately, right about this time I began hearing sirens. John, meanwhile, continued watching on his phone. All I could do was stand there. There was no way I would be going outside while she was there. And according to the restraining order I got, I didn't have to. Eventually they got Allison and took her away. Not exactly sure where, but they could put her on Mars for all I care, so long as she's gone. Then they came and spoke to me and Johnny. We showed them the footage of her outside my window and stuff. They were really grateful and asked us to email their department a copy of the file the camera downloaded. No problem there. According to them, another unit had searched Allison's apartment and had documented what they found. At the moment, she was heading for a psychological evaluation. Apparently, she managed to get into more trouble besides leaving me a doll and stalking me. Then the head officer on the scene asked me a final question. "Was she seeing anyone after you?" "Wait, what? Did you not see her outside my apartment talking to a toy?" But to get this all over with, I answered their question. "No, all I know is she was cheating on me with some guy." "Thank you, but now it was my turn to ask a question." "Why do you ask?" The officer didn't say anything, but took turn to the woman next to him, who handed him a folder. He gave it to me without a word. I opened the file and began going through it. It was Allison's apartment, or what had been Allison's apartment. It was a complete wreck. You couldn't tell what furniture had been where, or what clothes she had previously owned. It looked like a tornado had ripped through the place, but that didn't bother me so much. The papers all over the walls, though, that was different. It looked like every inch of wall, from the kitchen, the bedroom, to even the bathroom, was covered in paper. But that paper wasn't blank. Far from it. There was writing in virtually every free inch, in various styles and colors, using Sharpies, pens, and crayons, on different types of paper, from sticky notes to pages torn out from notebooks and legal pads. Neat and messy handwriting, large and small print. Some of the pictures had been zoomed in, so I could finally make out what was written on them. I should have never messed around with him. "He won't leave me alone. He is evil. Someone please help me," written over and over again. It felt like someone had just dumped a bucket of ice down my back. Now I understood the question. One of the other officers, who had been pretty quiet so far, spoke up. "Don't worry, man. She's gonna be going to a mental hospital for a while. I've seen things like this a million times. People can get a bit obsessive. But I gotta say, that stuffed thing is creepy as hell." "What makes you say that?" I couldn't help but ask, even though I totally agreed. "You know that feeling you get when you are a kid and there is that one toy or something that you can almost feel watching you, no matter what you do?" I nodded. It was just like that. "But don't you worry, we made sure that thing went with her. She won't be able to bother you again." With that, the cops left and John and I went back inside. I felt relieved they were taking her somewhere. I never want to see her or her stuffed bear again. After Allison was carted off, I did my best to get things back to normal. But believe me, it wasn't easy. Right after the cops took her out of my hair, I called Mrs. Arlington. "Hey, Mrs. Arlington. Vince, so glad to hear from you. Is everything okay?" Concern broke into her tone. She was under no illusion what I was up against. "Yeah, everything is fine. They just took Allison to a mental institution." "That's wonderful." "My God, that sounds so horrible to say that was your typical Mrs. Arlington," or as she preferred her friends to call her, Sharon. No matter how many times she insisted I call her by her first name, I always referred to her as Mrs. Arlington. Out respect, you know? No, I get you. Believe me. They can do something about her there. I just wanted to let you know what was going on here so you could make plans accordingly. Thank you, Vince. Always so thoughtful. But if you don't mind, I'd like to stay here a bit longer. She's letting me stay in her place with my friend because of my psycho ex-girlfriend, and I am the thoughtful one. Mrs. Arlington could move to the shadiest neighborhood in existence, and I would gladly follow her, just to have her as my neighbor. They don't find neighbors like that much anymore. Not at all. Take your time. Be safe and have fun. Same to you, my boy Double. Thanks for calling, Vince. Always. Take care. I wasn't sure quite what to do now. What was I supposed to do? How was I supposed to feel? There is nothing quite like seeing someone you used to date carted off by the cops. I was relieved, but I also couldn't help but enjoy it, just a little bit. I usually don't enjoy seeing someone thrown into a mental hospital, but usually said person didn't screw some other guy behind my back. The other part of me was also wondering when the film crew of Impractical Jokers or something was gonna pop out to say it was all a stunt. I knew it wasn't, but it all seemed so surreal. John stayed with me for a little bit long, until I didn't mind if he headed back home. Mrs. Arlington's, to be specific. I didn't feel quite ready to move back into my place just yet. Slowly, things began to feel all right again. I got into a routine and it didn't change. I was looking over my shoulder less and sleep was coming easier to me. Eventually, Mrs. Arlington came back from her trip and things began to go back as they were, pre-Allison. We still had the camera system installed. Why get rid of it? It could come in handy sometime. Plus, we also tended to forget it was there. About 5 nights ago, I was asleep when something woke me up. I had no idea what caused it, but I had that uneasy jolted awake feeling, like when a sudden nightmare wakes you up. Something in the air just felt wrong. As I began to take in my surroundings, I noticed I was sweating pretty heavily. Outside of a gym, this never happened to me. My eyes slowly began adapting to the darkness. I immediately checked my phone. It was 3 a.m. on the dot. No sign of any disturbances outside. I got up, turned on the lights, and checked all the locks and everything. Nothing out of place. In my head, I knew everything was all as it should be. But there was something up that just didn't match. Since nothing was wrong, there wasn't really anything I could do. To help get back to sleep, I got myself a drink of water. As I gulped it down, it was just what was needed. Nothing like a drink of water when you wake up in the middle of the night for no reason. As I was about to head back to bed, I heard the doorbell ring. Hearing it almost made me jump out of my skin in shock. I immediately checked my phone. Nothing, not a soul outside. No motion detected anywhere, but as usual, I was able to get audio. For some reason, I felt I should check that as well. Holding the phone close to my ear, I was able to barely make out some noise. Something or someone was laughing. Not just any laughing, it was that unfriendly, cold laugh people use when they know something you don't. The kind that rattles your nerves and makes you suspicious. Just hearing it made me shiver. I frantically checked all the cameras, thinking the sound was coming from the bushes or something, but I found nothing. I felt helpless. All I could do was stand rooted to my spot. After what felt like a lifetime, I headed back to bed. Before getting back under the covers, I made sure to take out John's gift to me so it was handy should I require it. Just as I had gotten back under the covers, I heard something else. Except this time, it wasn't the doorbell. It was someone knocking at the door. Heavy, frantic, let me in type knocking. Yeah, that wasn't about to happen. There was no way I was even thinking of answering the door. Still, my phone was showing no signs of anyone there. At this point, I had no idea what to think, so I just rolled over and ignored it. Everything was tightly locked, so as long as I stayed inside and didn't do anything stupid, there was nothing to really be worried about. Of course, that is so much easier said than done when something or someone you can't see is at your door at 3 a.m. I laid there for what seemed like an eternity before drifting off. I woke up a few hours later. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Seeing the gun John got me brought everything rushing back to my mind. Weirdly enough though, I felt like I had a great night's sleep. It felt like whatever I thought happened last night was just some dream. That had been happening a lot lately. Stuff with Allison was beginning to seem like some bad dream that wasn't real. I had even gotten rid of the doll I found, and let me tell you, I am so glad I did. My house started feeling more like my home ever since. It was a gorgeous day outside, and I was in a good mood, so I decided to make myself a real breakfast. No hastily eaten granola bar today. No, today was French toast day. Personally, I have always preferred French toast or waffles to pancakes. Firing up the stove, I got down to business. There are two ways to make French toast with legit French brioche bread, or not at all. Trust me, once you make French toast with this bread, you will never go back to any other bread. It is also fantastic for a grilled cheese. The sweet, thick bread is just like a sponge, so it works perfectly. The buttery, sweet smell filled the air, making my place seem the most welcoming, content place it had been in a long time. When everything was ready, it was time to chow down. I don't know if it was because it had been so long since I had made it, or because I was starving, but it was fantastic. I had just finished eating and was having some orange juice when my phone rang. I studied it for a moment before I answered. Hello. Hi. Is this Vince O'Malley? A professional-sounding man's voice asked. Depends on who wants to know. I wasn't about to give that info away after all that had happened. Of course, this is Dr. Edwin Burton. I am the current chief of staff at the hospital where one Allison Dunbar was being treated. Great. Just what I wanted to hear. Well, isn't that just swell? I spat out harsher than I intended. Look, doctor, whatever your name is, just give me whatever you have to say and leave me alone. She has caused me far more trouble than she's worth. I felt bad for a moment because it wasn't the guy's fault, but at this point I couldn't be bothered to care. Certainly, and I apologize for having to call you. It's simply that the police mandated we inform you if there was any news in her case. Forgive me, but I am not sure how to tell you this. Just go ahead and say it. I took a deep breath. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but Allison is dead. She was found dead in her room yesterday. That definitely was not what I expected him to say. In that moment, I felt nothing. My entire body felt numb. My mind was apparently in agreement. I felt like everything was on autopilot. How that was all I could think of saying. When she was first brought here, I could tell right away she was going to be a problem case. She was always too quiet. Whenever another patient or staff member had a problem with her, she never reacted or lashed out. Those are the ones you need to watch out for. But it was her drawing that concerned me the most. Drawing? Oh yeah, by now you know better than anyone of Allison's recent creative streak. When she was brought here, that was the only thing she would do. Draw pictures. But those pictures were definitely not the healthy things one wants someone to draw. Oh, I can imagine what you mean. I know you can, Mr. O'Malley. I was beginning to feel better about this guy. She would draw endless pictures of what looked like people getting stabbed. Most of them looked like families being murdered in their beds. Soon her entire room was filled with them. I also think she reverted back to a stage of adolescent behavior. The only person she would speak to was the toy that was brought with her as the only personal item. Mr. Bear, how could I forget? Indeed. So 2 nights ago, Allison had been particularly difficult. Fought with both fellow patients in the common room and the staff assigned to her. After subduing her, she screamed for hours. Horrible. Obscene curses threatening revenge. At one point, she even started screaming in Russian, I believe it was. Wait, what? Allison could barely speak English, let alone a foreign language. Yes, one of the orderlies here is named Tatiana and is from Ukraine. She helped us translate Allison's ravings to mean blood will be spilt or something like that. That's insane. And I know who I am talking to. I didn't know what to think anymore. You would be accurate in that. So come yesterday morning, the staff goes in to check on Allison. They found that she was dead. Cause of death was revealed. She committed suicide by means of ingesting some pills. The initial autopsy revealed it was a lethal cocktail of sleeping pills and painkillers. How could she get them? Did she steal them from the doctors or something? Believe me, Vince, we keep a very strict watch on our pill stocks. Every pill is accounted for. She was also completely searched for anything on her arrival. Metal detector and everything. Somehow, he didn't need to finish his thought. I had an idea of what he would mention next, but we never thought she would think to hide pills in advance inside the teddy bear. She was brought immediately to the hospital after she taken by the police. We even searched the bear, opened the zipper and everything. All security found was what appeared to be the stuffing for the toy. That was the most unbelievable part. She didn't even smuggle in whole pills. She had crushed them up beforehand so they were ready. Nothing inside it came up as flammable or anything, so we had no reason to look any further. I don't blame you, doctor. It is unbelievable. How could she have known to smuggle crushed up pills inside a stuffed animal before coming over to me? This is without a doubt the weirdest case of my career, and that is really saying something. But now you know. You don't have to worry about her any longer. Thank you for telling me. Oh, and sorry for being rude earlier. No problem. I know what happened in your situation. I would never want to hear about some psycho ex ever again either. One last question, a sudden thought just came in my head. Of course. Do you know when she died? Estimated cause of death was between about 2 and 4 a.m. No, it couldn't be possible. Everything was fine now. Allison was dead, and that was that. Some doorbell ringing didn't change that. Thank you for telling me, doctor. Take care. I was just about to hang up before you had one last word for me. You take care of yourself, Vince. With that, the call was over. Allison was over. Even now, I have no idea what to think or feel. There isn't exactly a guide for this sort of thing. I won't lie, it is a relief that I won't have to worry about her anymore. There is just one thing that bothers me. How was it possible she was speaking Russian? After I got the news about Allison, the first few days that followed were a bit weird. It all felt so surreal, like it couldn't possibly be happening. Part of me was expecting to get some phone call saying that it had all been a mistake. But that never came. Whenever I would go out for something, I would occasionally look over my shoulder, half expecting to see Allison lurking there. This never happened either. After about 2 weeks, it finally began to sink in. She really was gone. Honestly, I wasn't sure what to do or think. I was glad she wouldn't threaten me or anyone I cared about, but I definitely did not want it to come to this. It all seemed unsatisfying. I don't blame myself or anything, because everything was entirely her decision. I couldn't understand her mindset if I tried. And believe me, I tried. I learned a long time ago, if someone truly has their heart set on something, there is nothing you can do. I decided to do what any sensible person who goes through something mentally and emotionally trying does. I stocked up on Ben and Jerry's ice cream and watched a lot of TV. There is just something inherently soothing about ice cream. It can instantly make a bad day better. So it was time to binge watch my favorite shows while stuffing my face with Vermont's finest ice cream. So I went to the store and stocked up Chubby Hubby, and mint chocolate chip were first up. But since they were having a sale on Breyers, I decided to cut some of that too. How could you go wrong with cookies and cream? Once I got home, it was time to get down to business. Pressing play on my laptop, I turned on The Walking Dead. I was so behind on the show, it was terrible. I couldn't remember the last time I watched it. Funny enough, Allison hated the show. Said something about it being too violent and creepy. I know, ironic, right? I, on the other hand, am a man of simple pleasures. I appreciate zombies and ice cream. Combine the two, and that is something special. As the episodes began streaming, I felt myself relaxing. The most at ease I had felt in a long time. With a tub of ice cream in one hand, spoon in the other, my feet up on the coffee table, and the survival efforts of Rick Grimes and his crew unfolding before me, the whole Allison thing seemed to fade into the background. Mint chocolate chip was always my favorite flavor, so I had started with that. The cold, crisp taste was delicious as always. For the first time since the whole Allison saga began, I was actually having fun. You look over your shoulder for so long, you forget to live any other way. I was gonna make sure I had a lot more moments like this. The next few hours seemed to melt away. Before I knew it, it was 11 p.m. Logging out of Netflix, I began browsing the web after I checked my email. The usual clickbait stuff was entertaining enough, not to mention the always amusing cat videos that never failed to make you smile. Scrolling down, something else had caught my eye. Local man found dead in house fire. I clicked on the article and began to read it. Daniel Millstone, 43, was found dead in his home late yesterday morning. Emergency responders were called by Millstone's neighbors, who could smell smoke coming from the Millstone residence. Upon arriving on the scene, Fire Chief Jim Bradley confirmed that a small fire caused by a cigarette not properly extinguished was the cause. The article went on to quote Chief Bradley as saying Mr. Millstone appeared to have fallen asleep while smoking and the cigarette butt was not properly extinguished at the time. We believe that started the fire and Mr. Millstone died from smoke inhalation. Fortunately, his family was out of the house at the time of the incident. They were able to inform us that Mr. Millstone worked third shift as a medic at the Longford County Mental Institution and often came home tired and smoked to unwind. Wait a minute. That was the same place Allison was. Immediately, I felt my body tense up. I tried to make myself relax, telling myself they didn't say smoking kills for nothing. People died from falling asleep while smoking all the time. So I read on. The article went on with the usual obituary stuff, date and location of birth, parents, family, you know the drill. But towards the end, one other thing caught my attention. He had a natural affinity for languages and spoke at least 4 fluently French, Chinese, Italian, and Russian. Russian? Isn't that what Allison was screaming before she died? That was a little odd. But I read on, trying to convince myself that it wasn't unheard of or anything. But that lasted for about 30 seconds. The obituary went on to list a few of the guy's favorite things. His favorite movie was the Daniel Day-Lewis movie There Will Be Blood. Now when I heard that, I felt colder than when I had been scarfing down all that ice cream. When in the hospital, Allison had screamed, "Blood will be spilt." At first, the phrase by itself had been creepy enough. But now I realized that often things got switched in translation, especially titles of books or movies. There will be blood, blood will be spilt. Is it just me, or is that too much of a coincidence? As I was about to shut my computer off, I realized something. I felt the familiar sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach as I did. The doctor. He told me the woman translated what Allison said as blood will be spilt, or something meaning that something could have been lost in translation. I had to take a deep breath at this. I could feel my heart beginning to pound faster, especially as I realized something else. The guy worked third shift, also known, rather appropriately in this case, as the graveyard shift, the same shift that Allison died during. Just as I was about to click out of the article, I saw it had a picture to go with the obituary. It was of the Millstone family, the most recent family picture, according to the caption. Nice family by all appearances. What caught my attention most of all was of the daughter. Average-looking girl, but it was what she was holding that caught my attention. It was a teddy bear, but not just any old teddy bear. Mr. Bear. I knew it was him because it had the exact same worn look that I had seen on my phone that night. Just seeing that thing made me want to scream. I immediately closed the link and shut my laptop. I did what I could to tell myself to relax. So what if he gave his daughter a teddy bear? Happens all the time. Yard sales, hand-me-downs, what's the difference? But I won't lie to you guys, that was creepy. I don't exactly know what to think at this point. Maybe I am overreacting or something. So after the whole incident with Mr. Bear, I did everything I could to forget about Allison. For a while, I thought the whole thing was over. As time passed, I began to relax. Everything seemed like it was getting back to normal. No weird news reports, no unexplained noises in or around my house, and nothing abnormal on the security cameras. Maybe, just maybe, it was all behind me. Or that's what I thought until today. I came home at the usual time to relax and have dinner. For some reason, I felt like treating myself, so I ordered pizza with breadsticks. It was delicious as usual. There is nothing like the feeling of eating takeout pizza while sitting on the couch and watching a movie. So there I was, scarfing down my meat lover's pizza, minding my own business, when there was a knock at the door. Since I had nothing really to worry about anymore, I got up without hesitation. Although you can bet I checked the camera outside first on my way to the door. Old habits die hard. Standing there was this woman I had never met before. "Who is it?" I asked. "Hi Vince, you don't know me, way to state the obvious, sweetie. But I know who you are. I'm Chloe. I was an old friend of Allison's when we were kids. Great. Just great." At this point I wasn't afraid or anything, there was just rage. What the hell could she possibly want from me? Here I was, minding my own business, and she has the nerve to interrupt me. I stood there for a moment, rooted to the spot. There was no way I was gonna let this girl in my house, not without a very good reason. "What do you want?" I snarled at her. I could see her flinch through the camera feed, but I didn't care. "Hey," she could have given me some notice that she was coming. That way I could have pretended like I wasn't there or something. "I know you are upset about Allison, but I swear to you, this is important. I couldn't tell you how long I stood in the hallway, but eventually I heard myself say the words. What is it? I knew Allison years ago. I have information about her past. Meet me tomorrow at Brewster's coffee shop. It's about 30 minutes from here. I still wasn't comfortable in letting her inside. I know where it is. Chloe didn't dare say another word. Perhaps she was worried if she argued or spoke too much, it would make me change my mind. Maybe she was right. 3 o'clock. And don't be late. She didn't say anything, but she nodded in comprehension and walked off my porch. I took a deep breath. At this point, I had no idea what to expect, but I might as well get this over with. I went back to my couch and tried to return to my pizza. Somehow my appetite was significantly diminished. Oh well, plenty for tomorrow. Leftover pizza is one of the great joys of life. When I went to bed that night, all I could do was thrash around and stare up at the ceiling. After a faint bit of sleep, I rolled myself out of bed and got ready to leave. Brewster's was a cozy little coffee shop located at the heart of Poplar Bluffs. Its dark burgundy walls and overstuffed leather sofas make you feel automatically relaxed the minute you walk inside. Baristas there know your name, your order, all that good stuff. I walked in, and there was Chloe, perched on one of the overstuffed brown leather armchairs. Seeing me, she instantly sat upright. Her long black hair was tied back in a ponytail, and she stuffed her phone in the pocket of her black jeans as I walked in. "Give me a moment," I said, as I pointed to the counter. She nodded in understanding. If I was gonna take a trip back to Acta Allison Land, I was gonna need my fix. As I approached the counter, I saw that my usual barista, Evan, was working today. "Making your usual right now, Vince," he called out smoothly. "Good man, no one made a double-shot caramel latte like Evan did." As I handed him the money for my order, he waved it away. "She already paid for it. Said to make your usual, and it was on her." He pointed to Chloe. "Thanks, Evan. You're the best here," I said gratefully as I turned back to Chloe. That was a surprisingly nice gesture from her. Hopefully this wasn't in preparation for more bad news. "Thank you for the coffee." I sat down across from her as I took a sip. "No problem. It's the least I can do. A stranger showing up at your front door with more Allison drama after so long. You have no idea who I am, and yet here I am. Wanting some of your time to talk about something I couldn't blame you for not wanting to talk about for the rest of your life. But I promise you, it's something you deserve to know, and as soon as I'm done, I will be gone." Her words came out like she couldn't say them fast enough. Chloe took a deep breath and looked down at her hands. The universal sign for "I don't know how to say this." I glanced at her hands, 2 fingers laced together and clasped tightly on her lap. Poor girl was way more on edge than I was. For the first time, I felt genuinely sorry for her. "It's okay. Go ahead and say what you came to tell me. I won't interrupt you. I guess it'll be good to get some answers for once." I spoke up in what I hoped was a friendly, inviting tone. Since she looked up at me and seemed to relax, I guess I did something right. Okay, Allison and I were neighbors growing up. I first moved to the neighborhood she lived when I was about 7, and I lived there until I was about 20. I will never forget the first day I met Allison. We had lived there for about a week when her family came by to introduce themselves. Her parents and Allison were nice, but for some reason I didn't like them. I didn't know it meant at that age. All I knew is that I didn't really feel comfortable around them. As a kid, you have no idea how to understand and process emotions and observations. It wasn't that they weren't nice, but there was something more to them. Something that you couldn't really name, but you could sense. My parents invited Allison and her parents to our house once for dinner, and it went fine. But my parents were never keen to socialize with them, and Allison and I only spoke in passing. Our families were cordial, but not close. The funny thing is, they might have been the ideal neighbors, respectful, courteous, but they definitely kept to themselves. She paused to take a sip of the bottle of water she had in her purse. About 6 years after we moved there, I was in the living room on the couch doing my homework. I was sitting on the couch when I heard a noise, so I looked out the window. There was her father, Mr. Dunbar, who had just gotten home. At first, I didn't think anything of it, but then I saw who he was with. Some woman who was most definitely not Mrs. Dunbar. Allison and her mother had gone out of town to visit Allison's grandmother, and her father had stayed behind. From what people have told me since, I think Allison's grandmother didn't like Mr. Dunbar. At first, I had no idea what was going on. He looked super tense, and she looked all nervous too. But when I saw them quickly go inside, and the light in the master bedroom went on, I could figure out what happened. The rest of the night, I had no idea what to do. But as usual, I told my parents exactly what I saw. They thanked me for being honest with them and told me not to say a word to anyone. They said it was something for adults and left it at that. When Chloe said that, I couldn't help but wonder. Kids are far more perceptive than adults like to think. Did Allison know something was up in her parents' marriage? But Chloe had more to say. Allison and I didn't go to the same school, so we didn't really see much of each other. She and her mother came back from their trip a week later, and as far as I could tell, they had no idea what happened. They all carried on as normal, or as close to normal as they could get, because I truly wonder if they ever were normal, if there is such a thing. I think when there is a big family secret, every member of the family reacts to it, even if they have no idea what exactly it is they are reacting to. Not unlike how I felt about Allison's family, they can sense it even if they can't understand it. Her parents began to argue more than they had in the past. I could see them in the windows. My room on the second floor had an excellent view of the kitchen windows where I could watch without them seeing me. All parents argue at some point, but this was different. I will never forget their expressions, the pure resentment and bitterness. Sometimes they would blast music to try to cover up the noise if Allison happened to be home. After that, things got worse. It became an open secret in town that things were bad at their house. You were afraid to see or talk to Allison or her parents because you didn't want to say the wrong thing. Everyone could feel that something had gone sour with them. About 3 months later, Mr. Dunbar left home one night and didn't come back. "You're kidding me." "Wish I was," she said sadly. "Nope, it was in July, an incredibly humid day Friday. I heard his car leave the garage about 7 that night, and it never came back. He was reported missing. They went out looking for him and the usual, but he never came back, and to this day, no one knows what happened to him. I also never saw the woman be brought to their house again. She worked as a legal secretary for one of the town's big-shot lawyers. Beautiful young woman too. Part of me couldn't believe what I was hearing, but the other part was taking it in and wasn't the least bit surprised. Allison never said a word about this. She told me her parents divorced when she was young, and she occasionally saw both of them. Chloe faintly nodded in understanding. Not surprised. I don't think she ever truly came to terms with what happened, especially with Mrs. Dunbar's behavior after her father vanished. Usually when your husband disappears, you are a wreck, a total basket case. She was the exact opposite. It was like a switch had been flipped. I never liked either of Allison's parents, but her mother was always worse. Always. She always seems so nice, too nice. You ever have the sense that someone is putting on an act that is always on? That was Mrs. Dunbar. She was always perfectly dressed, makeup always on, but she was a very reserved person. But once Allison's father disappeared, it was like this fresh, vibrant, exuberant woman came out. Believe me, people began to talk. You can imagine what they said. Word also began to get out about Allison at school. I had a few friends who went to her school. She began acting out, getting into fights, the usual type of misbehaving. They never liked her much to begin with, but after Mr. Dunbar was gone, dislike turned to fear. I didn't bump into Allison too much after that, fortunately. Both her and her mother moved away about 2 years later. I haven't seen them since I sipped the last of my coffee before I asked the question I had been waiting to since she appeared on my doorstep. Wow. I have to ask though, how did you find me? She looked like an unbearable burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Chloe was now the most relaxed I had seen her. I always wondered what happened to her. We all did. Allison was a beautiful girl, always was. Even if you didn't know her, you felt bad for her. My mom was online for something or other about a month ago, and she stumbled upon the news that Allison had died. Someone had shared the news on social media or something. It said in the obituary where she used to work. So I went there, and they told me what she had gotten into, and that she went psycho on a former boyfriend, which was how I got your name. I looked it up in the address book, and here I am. That made sense. But she had one last thing to say. I know she put you through a lot, and I truly feel for you. I won't ask you to take pity on her or anything like that, but I just thought I should tell you what I know. Thank you for that, and for the coffee. Thank you for listening. I am sorry to have brought her back up, but I honestly didn't know what else to do. It's okay. It was the truth. We should never apologize for being real. Since you've been so kind to come find me, I guess I should tell you what I know. I took a deep breath and told her my side of things. I hesitated at first, but the story came out easier as I spoke. I had never really confided in anyone for months about this, and it felt oddly helpful to tell the story to a complete stranger who could relate. Chloe flinched a few times during the story. She even shed a tear when I told her about Allison being taken to the hospital, but she never once interrupted me. When I finished, we sat there in silence. I am so sorry is all she could say. I didn't say a word, but I nodded. She stood up from her chair and stretched. Thanks again for your time, Vince. You are a good man. She didn't deserve you, but you did your best. Thank you, that means a lot. Suddenly, she swept me up in a hug. It felt oddly comforting. If you need anything, call me. She extended me a number written on a piece of paper. I pocketed it. Sure thing. Have you made arrangements and all that to get home? Yep, don't worry about me. You've been more than fair. We left after that, and I got home, feeling better than I had in a long time. I made a point of putting Chloe's number in my contact list, and I texted her, saying if she ever needed anyone to talk to, I was there. She told me that was so sweet of me, and that she would. I was just about to put the matter out of my mind when Chloe texted me a picture. I forgot to bring this. The woman on the left is the woman I saw with Allison's father that night. Are you fucking kidding me? I almost shouted out loud. I almost dropped my phone when I saw the photo. Suddenly it felt harder to breathe, and I had to hold onto the wall for a moment for support. After a few minutes, I managed to calm myself down enough to answer the message. She immediately called me and I told her what was up. Chloe said if needed anything, to get a hold of her ASAP. I told her to come over tomorrow and we would get some answers. The photo was older and a little faded. From the looks of it, it was taken in the late 80s, early 90s. There were two people in the picture, a woman and a man. The woman in it was an attractive brunette in her early 20s with a slender figure. Apparently she was happy because a smile was plastered on her face for the picture. She had aged and dressed a little differently now, but I recognized her immediately. Chloe arrived promptly at 2 p.m. today. While she was here right on schedule, it still wasn't fast enough for me. My mind spent the entire night racing, thinking about everything I knew about Mrs. Arlington. I don't think I slept for a moment. Not even a shot of whiskey helped, but it did calm me down a bit. Since it was a Saturday, we knew Mrs. Arlington, if that was even her real name, would be home. I couldn't believe it. Did she know all this time? Was it a coincidence she moved next to me? Is that why Allison broke in? Not to get at me, but for a crack at her? The last thought sent a shiver through my body. Right as if on cue, the doorbell rang. Not gonna lie, that moment made me jump. I ran to open it, and there was Chloe. She walked inside without saying a word, but once the door was shut, she immediately greeted me with a hug. As is often the case, I didn't know how much I needed one until that moment. Sitting down on my couch, we tried to figure out how to approach the situation. "I'll invite her here," I began. "I want her right where I know where everything is. My man John, who I told you about, will be here in a few too. Not gonna take a single chance. He'll be ready with some assistance should it be required. In fact, another friend of his will be bringing some assistance as well." Chloe nodded in approval. "Good idea. I'll be the one to show her the photo, and you will be the one to say how you got it." "Sounds like a plan." She hesitated a moment before continuing. "What do you think she will do?" I sat there for a moment. I had no idea what to say. The woman had been an ideal neighbor for years. Not once had she laid a finger on me. She had been nothing but helpful and kind to me. At this point, she was almost like family to me. Perhaps part of me didn't want to believe anything bad would happen, but after everything that's happened so far, I wasn't about to count anything out. "I don't know," I eventually whispered. John and his backup, another bouncer named Travis, got there about 45 minutes later. I didn't think it was possible, but Travis was even bigger than John was. But when he saw me, Travis immediately shook my hand. John told me what happened. "Shit is crazy, man." That was the most accurate thing anyone had ever said so far about this whole thing. Shortly after they arrived, I called Mrs. Arlington to come over. I told her I had something to show her about Allison. As expected, she said she would be right over. When she spoke in her usual friendly, inviting tone, it made my heart sink. I know in my head she was lying to me, but I guess I didn't like the idea of ambushing her like this. But I immediately reminded myself I was doing the right thing, and she had been the one keeping secrets. "Just come on by now if you have nothing going on." The doors open, I made sure to keep my voice innocuous. Mrs. Arlington immediately agreed, and within minutes I heard her walk across the driveway and up the steps, and the front door opened. I heard her call out, and I told her to come in the living room. She walked into the living room and immediately looked confused. "Oh, why hello there." She looked around at the people there. "Vince, I thought you had something to show me." Her blue eyes looked at me uncertainly. "I do," I said as I handed Mrs. Arlington the photo of her that Chloe had gotten. The original one, not some phone screenshot. There was just something about holding an original photo. She looked at it for a full minute. I think she was in shock. In that instant, you could feel the atmosphere change. It was like Mrs. Arlington was physically diminished. "Where did you get this?" was all she could say. Her eyes looked different than I had ever seen them, almost like a mouse's, timid and nervous. I didn't say a word, but I pointed to Chloe. I could see Mrs. Arlington nervously glancing at John and Travis. She knew perfectly well what John did for me in the past. "You were at Allison's house that night with her father. The bedroom. You both looked pretty keen not to be seen. Which makes sense, because he disappeared not too long after that. So tell us what you know." In that moment, I could feel something silently break within Mrs. Arlington. If you have ever seen something bad happen to someone, you know what I mean. It is like their body physically changes before you. "My God, I am so sorry I didn't tell you. I swear to you. I had no idea," she muttered before telling us more. "This was so long ago. I swear to you, Vince, I had no idea Allison was Jerry's daughter. It all makes so much sense. So, here's what I know." Damn, how could I have not seen the resemblance? She chastised herself before cleared her throat and getting down to business. "It's true, I was there that night, but not for what you think. As you know by now, back then I was a legal secretary in town. Allison's hometown, although it is only about 4 hours away. It might as well be a million miles away. I was fresh out of school and had just landed that job when Jerry Dunbar came to our office. Will Sanders was the best lawyer in town, and it was an honor to work for him. I don't blame Jerry for wanting the best. What do you mean? Chloe asked. Her brow furrowed in suspicion. You knew the Dunbar family, Mrs. Arlington asked her, to which Chloe nodded. Then you know what I mean when I say things were not right in that family, especially with the mother. It's why I say it all makes sense now. Jerry Dunbar came to us for legal help. He wanted a divorce from Allison's mother, Clara. But he didn't just want a divorce. No, he wanted full custody. And that was just to warm up. Jerry said Allison's mother was dangerous, and he wanted the courts to intervene. I sat there silently, not sure what to feel. Chloe looked as pale as my kitchen floor, which was bone white. Mrs. Arlington's voice had become more steady as she spoke. He was terrified of her. Absolutely terrified. Over the years he had seen things, heard things, and when he was really lucky, he experienced it. For example, she would lie about the most routine things no normal person would lie about, or she would have an absolute fit over stupid petty things, like a piece of furniture being moved or the color of wallpaper, but she was never violent. At least not to him. That was one of the things that terrified him. She had all this rage built up, and very rarely it would peek its head up, but it would always go right away, leaving him unsure if it had really happened. Jerry had a friend from work who had a doctor for a brother, and Jerry called him up for his opinion. Well, turns out Clara was a dead ringer for being ill, seriously mentally ill. I forget what it is called, but it wasn't bipolar or depression. No, this was major, as in call the FBI profilers type bad. What's your name, honey? She suddenly asked Chloe. Chloe, she replied hesitantly. Lovely name, she said with a warm smile. In spite of everything, Mrs. Arlington managed to make Chloe smile as well. Well, Chloe, let me ask you something. Did you always feel that Mrs. Dunbar was always perfect? Like a china doll that never gets blemished, always has a perfect answer for everything. Yes, she practically whispered. I had the same feeling too. Creepy, isn't it? Almost makes you wonder if she was human. I didn't know exactly what to call it when I met her, but there was something different about her. Well, what made Jerry call us was that he had been thinking about this for a long time. But what broke the camel's back, so to speak, was Clara's trip to visit her mother. The one that she took when you saw me at their house. Well, Jerry was instantly suspicious. Because Clara loathed her mother. Absolutely hated the woman. Called her every name possible. So when Clara started acting all concerned about her mother, Jerry knew instantly something was up. Once she was gone, Will had me go with Jerry to the house to look the place over. Said a woman's opinion was crucial. I would be able to look at things not just as an outsider, but as a woman examining another woman's habits. We looked for stuff related to Allison's grandmother, legal papers, letters, anything that would give us a clue to what was going on. Mrs. Arlington then paused. A pained look appeared in her eyes, as if she was bracing herself for something. Then we went into their bedroom, which was where Clara kept her important papers, inside a lockbox in her closet. That's why we went into the bedroom. After some trying, we managed to figure out the combination. For such a clever woman, she was surprisingly unimaginative about codes. It was Allison's birthday. November 3rd, 1988. 11.3.88. The number flashed through my mind like an involuntary spasm. I still remembered what I got her last year for her birthday. A new leather jacket. It cost an obscene fortune, but she looked so sexy in it. Light cream-colored leather. I can still practically smell the new leather scent. In spite of everything, the memory still managed to make me smile. Not that I would admit that to anyone, of course. We opened the box and went through the papers inside. Inside was the usual birth certificate, other identification papers, a few precious mementos, and other ordinary things. We were just about to put it back when Jerry found something. A recent life insurance policy taken out. But not for one of them, but for Allison's grandmother. Clara had taken it out about 6 months ago, and had been steadily spending more time with her mother in the time since. The policy was for $450,000 in the event of her mother's death. Bear in mind, Allison's grandmother was only in her early 60s and was in good health at the time, so it wasn't like she was betting on a sick old woman would die at any moment. At that moment, I felt sick. My intestines felt like someone was twisting them into balloon animals. It couldn't be possible. Confident that this explained a lot, Jerry told me he would get more information and speak to both me and my boss as soon as he had it. He kept in touch with us periodically, but never had any news. Finally, a few months later, Jerry came to see us at the office. Didn't call or anything. He just barged right in. That wasn't like him at all. The man was always a stickler for etiquette. Told us all that he was onto something and was gonna head out of town to follow Clara when she went to visit her mother this time. Allison was staying at a friend's house, so she didn't need to be watched. Told us he would call us as soon as he could. Well, that call never happened. Jerry never came back and was reported missing 3 days later. But that wasn't the worst part. That was when the calls began. The calls I asked blankly. At first, they came slowly. To Will Sanders at the office. No one ever spoke, just some heavy breathing. At first, we thought nothing of it. Working in a lawyer's office, you tend to become a bit desensitized to weirdness. But then they began happening at Will's home. Will had seen it all, so he could care less. But then they began happening at my home. At night, when I was alone. At first, it was just more heavy breathing. Don't get me wrong, that was a bit creepy, but I could deal with it. But then someone spoke on the line. Just one time. I will never forget that voice. It was a quiet voice, a charming sounding man. Don't worry about Jerry if you know what's good for you. Unless you want us to check up on you. Especially if you go into houses that aren't yours again. I felt goosebumps pop up on my skin when Mrs. Arlington said this. I had never in my life seen her look so afraid. Just thinking about it seemed to terrify her. After that, the calls stopped. They never called anyone else in the office but Will and me. To this day, I don't know how they knew I was with Jerry, but they did. Believe you me, I never went anywhere near the Dunbar house again. We told the police what had happened, but they couldn't find anything. I left town not long after that call and did everything to forget the whole thing ever happened. I swear to you, Vince, I had no idea Allison was Clara's daughter. I knew the girl's name was Allison. But there are a million Allisons out there. She also looked nothing like her mother. But it all makes sense now. They say if you want to see what a girl will be like when she gets older, look at her mother. This is the last thing I have to say. I have seen plenty of darkness in my life, but no human being ever made me look over my shoulder the way Clara Dunbar did. We sat there in silence after Mrs. Arlington finished speaking. She stood there, her arms folded against her chest. I wondered how long she had kept this story to herself. Years, probably. There were a million questions running through my mind. But somehow, Chloe asked the most important one before I could. What happened to Mrs. Dunbar? Mrs. Arlington took a breath before answering. No idea. And I can't say I'm sorry for that. Most I ever heard is that she left town and no one heard from her again. Anything else? I asked Mrs. Arlington blandly. No, Vince. And I promise you, had I known Allison was Clara's daughter, I would have told you immediately. Thank you. That will be all. Sharon, her face fell instantly at this, but she nodded in response. I had never called her by her first name before. Funny, it was sort of like when a parent calls a child by their full name. That's when you know you are in deep shit. Without saying a word, she walked out of my living room. The door shut quietly behind her. I don't think she will be invited here anytime soon. I thanked John and his friend for their backup, and they left shortly after. Chloe and I sat there for some time before she spoke. Do you believe it? She asked me. I nodded my head. I actually did believe her, and I didn't need to ask Chloe if she felt the same. I could see it on her face that Mrs. Arlington had accurately described what Chloe had experienced when the Dunbars lived next to her. We had some answers now, but that just created about 1,000 new questions we had yet to answer. Chloe bid me farewell and told me she would keep an eye out and to call me if I needed anything, and I told her to do the same. Now it was just me and my thoughts. One question dominated all the others. Odds were good Allison's father was dead. But what happened to her mother? After Chloe left, I was alone in my apartment. I took a deep breath and ran my fingers through my hair. That had really just happened. It's not every day you find out your neighbor knew someone you used to date had a batshit crazy mother. As I paced in my living room, I felt a wave of exhaustion suddenly wash over me. It's like that feeling when you're stuck on your feet all day and you finally get to sit down. You don't notice it when you are in the heat of the moment. It hits you later on when you don't expect it. It feels like a century had passed since I first met Allison. Hell, the more I think about it, the less it all feels real. It was almost too absurd to believe. I collapsed on the couch and put my feet up. Turning on my side, I stared at the carpet, but I wasn't really seeing it. After all this time, I didn't know what I believed about Allison anymore. That's the sad thing about breakups. You wonder what happened and how things got to the point they did. But here's the dirty little secret: the person you first start dating isn't the same person you break up with. The person you fall in love with is them on their best day. The person you break up with is them on their worst day. Infatuated occurs when you see someone as the person you imagine they are. The breakup invariably happens when we realize that isn't how they really are. Hence, what makes the end so painful at times. They weren't just lying to you. You were lying to yourself. Think of it this way: the beginning and end of a relationship is a lot like ordering food. The version that's advertised looks delicious, appealing, and interesting, so you immediately order it. But how it actually looks and tastes when you get it is usually somehow different. Sometimes it's the wrong thing entirely. And if there is one thing I know, it's how infuriating it is when they fuck up your order. That's a breakup for you. Did I ever really process the breakup with Allison? Shit, I don't even know anymore. Could it have gone another way? I have no idea. Did I do anything wrong? I had asked myself that question a million times, but I still don't have an answer. Was it my fault she went insane or whatever the hell happened to her? No, it wasn't. I knew that long ago, but after Chloe's visit it was set in stone. Clearly this girl had more baggage than the airport terminal. It was all so weird though. Times were good with me and her, or at least that's why I thought. Things went bad so quick I still can't get it. But that's what happens, I suppose. I mean, don't get me wrong. I wish things had ended on a different note between Allison and me. But I have no idea how that would have been possible. Another curse of dating, I suppose. You don't realize how little you know someone until it doesn't matter anymore. I still have no idea who Allison really was. I guess it was small consolation that I don't think anyone else did either, herself included. One thing was clearer now. The girl had a royally fucked up childhood. It gave me chills just thinking about it. You know what the worst part about this whole thing was? It wasn't what I knew, although that was pretty bad. No, the worst part was knowing that little bit, but also being aware there was more to the story and trying to imagine what else had happened. What I knew was just the tip of the iceberg. Trying to get that charming thought out of my head, I switched on the TV. After flipping through the channels, I didn't find anything that impressed me, so I decided on a movie. I decided to watch one of my all-time favorites, Amadeus. Arguably one of the greatest movies about jealousy ever made. It was always enjoyable to watch. After flipping through my DVR, I pressed play and turned up the volume. I let myself be taken to 18th century Vienna for a few hours. The stunning music and brilliant sets are always a wonder to behold. After it was over, I decided to go out for a jog in the park. I've been doing it on and off for years when the weather is decent. After a day like this, I sure needed a run to help burn off some energy. After switching the TV back off, I changed into my running clothes and jumped in the car. The short drive to the park where I jogged helped me relax. The area was well populated and still light out, so it was perfect. Parking the car, I began my job. I started out slow, but soon I felt myself speeding up and I went with it. Running in the crisp, cool air felt so refreshing. I did my usual circuit 30 minutes plus a warm-up and cool down. Towards the end, I panted as I felt my body burning up against the brisk fall air. Cracking open my water bottle, I gulped about half of it down immediately. Water never tastes so good as when you're parched after a workout. I slowly walked back to my car and collapsed on the seat. As I drove home, I decided on what to have for dinner. Roasted chicken with sautéed vegetables. Pulling in the driveway, I felt my appetite begin to take over. Getting out of the car was a bit of an effort. I felt that usual post-workout combination of satisfaction and fatigue. While mentally preoccupied making a list of ingredients, I grabbed my mail and began rummaging through it. The usual stuff, a bill here and there, with an ad thrown in for good measure. There was just one last thing, a small envelope with my name written on it. There was just a single piece of white paper inside, folded in half. Using a black Sharpie, someone had drawn a simple game of hangman. Apparently the game was over, as the hangman stick figure was fully drawn. At the bottom where the word or phrase was, 7 spaces were drawn. In the same Sharpie, someone had filled the in letters, DANIEL. What the hell? Who would send me this? I checked the envelope. The label was typed on, innocuous and professional looking. I grabbed my phone and called Chloe. Thank God she picked up immediately. Right now my heart was racing almost as bad as when I was jogging. Hi Vince, what's up? I got something in the mail. I'll send you a picture of it, I replied, as I angled my phone for the best view of the hangman. She paused for a moment before she received it. That is disturbing looking, was all she could say. I know. I have no idea who Daniel is. I can't think of anyone either. So this is the second time someone sent you a little gift regarding being hung at the end of a noose. Third, I got a letter shortly after the first telling me next time the version of me at the end of a rope wouldn't be a doll. Fuck. Okay, so clearly this is all connected somehow. Right. Just let me think about it. I'll call you back as soon as I have more. Okay. And Vince, be careful. I ended the call and paced around the floor for a moment. Daniel. After furiously racking my brain for a bit, I decided the best remedy was to do something unrelated to stimulate thought. The thing most people do when they don't know what else to do, eat. Taking the chicken out, I preheated the oven, prepped the chicken, and tossed it in the oven. I made swift work of the vegetables, dicing up garlic, carrots, asparagus, and potatoes and tossing them into the sauté pan. The simple and crisp smell filled the kitchen. Once the chicken was done, I took it out of the oven and checked it. Perfectly done, it was fall apart tender. Getting out a plate, the smell ready made me feel hungry. While odds are good that I shouldn't have been hungry after getting some other disturbing thing in the mail, I have to say that at this point, nothing really fazed me anymore. Not to mention I was no good on an empty stomach. I immediately began devouring my dinner. It tasted amazing. The juicy chicken mixed perfectly with the crisp, flavorful vegetables. Being a pretty fast eater even without a workout, I was done rather quickly. Yup, I needed to eat well after a workout. Otherwise I would end up needing a doctor or something. Wait just a second. Doctor? That made me remember something. I grabbed my laptop and was searching for something while I called Chloe back. When she picked up, I didn't wait for her to say anything before I began talking. Daniel, the guy who worked at the place where they took Allison. He took that creepy-ass bear of Allison and died in the fire. I just found it. Yup, Daniel Millstone, Chloe hastily confirmed. So I guess we need to pay a visit to him and his family. See what he saw at the hospital. I took a deep breath as I stepped off my front porch. The cool air caused my breathing to come out in faint white puffs. I wasn't quite sure how I felt about this. I knew objectively I needed to do it, but the idea gave me absolutely no pleasure. Quite the opposite, in fact. Part of me deeply resented it all. Here I was, taking time from my day off to go and dig up who knows what regarding Allison. I've heard of not being able to let someone go or move on after a breakup, but this was absurd. At this point, bawling my eyes out while listening to Alanis Morissette looked downright amazing to me. Come on. The sooner you figure this out, the sooner it will all be over, I told myself. While it didn't quite make me feel better, I knew that was the truth. I walked towards my garage and stepped inside. The pungent, earthy smell was oddly calming. Opening my car door and getting inside, I felt focused. A car is your second home, or perhaps your first depending on your living situation. One typically spends the bulk of their day in three places: work, home, and your car. Since what may be going on at one or two of them might be particularly unpleasant, it's always good to make sure the third is always in tip-top shape. A well-kept car is the perfect way to help you relax and get down to business. I suspect it's one reason why road rage is particularly contagious. Dealing with other drivers can puncture the temporary reprieve driving offers us. They joke about barbers or hairstylists knowing everything, but I will tell you who really knows is all limo drivers or any kind of chauffeur. Know why? Because they get to not only hear but see absolutely everything. It's one thing to hear about a crazy party, but actually witnessing America's sweetheart snorting cocaine off a car's armrest on the way to a movie premiere is very different. You'd think it's bad being the DD for your drunk friends on a Saturday night. That's like a boring Tuesday morning for a limo driver. They even made a movie on that idea, Baby Driver, and it was a pretty good one too. I turned the car on and cruised out of my garage. My car was particularly important to me these days because it had been in the shop when Allison first dropped by with that little souvenir for me. The fact that she hadn't been able to touch it shouldn't have meant so much to me, but it did. I looked at the dashboard, 11 a.m. I was right on time to pick Chloe up. Since we last spoke, I had been doing my own research on the guy who died in the fire. Nothing came up, nothing in the news, no criminal record, just the little blurb about what happened. After about 15 minutes, I arrived at the hotel. Chloe was staying at one of those cheap, but still moderately respectable inns, the Walton Arms. She was ready for me by the hotel's front, just as I expected. "Hey, how are you?" she asked breezily as she hopped in the passenger seat beside me. "Fine, I guess. Can't complain. You?" "Good. Did you find anything?" "Nothing. Not a single thing," I said as I pulled out of the parking lot and headed onto the highway. "I didn't expect you would." I looked too, and from what I can tell, the dude was a straight shooter. As the car glided onto the highway, I realized something. Chloe was the first girl to ride in my car since Allison. It wasn't an unpleasant thought or anything, but it was weird to think about. Putting it out of my head, I focused on the road. I know. It's weird. But hey, that's nothing new with this whole thing. I can't wait to see what the doctor has to tell us. "Ah, right. The doctor who told you Allison died in the hospital." "Yup. I've always wondered what Allison did in the meantime after we broke up. The guy already spoke to me once when he didn't have to. Let's get him to do the same thing twice." Sounds like a plan. We went along in comfortable silence for a little while. The car humming on the road never ceased to help me focus. After a while, I thought of a question I had never really considered before. What kind of men did Allison go with before me? I might have been asking it more of myself than Chloe. I threw a sidewise glance at her. She looked unsure of what to say. "I don't really know. All that I know is growing up she had the biggest crush on Justin Timberlake, and her favorite Disney prince was Eric from The Little Mermaid. So basically every other girl in the history of the universe," I muttered. "I was more of an Aladdin girl," she offered. "I can respect that. Robin Williams made that movie what it was." "He sure did. Fucking shame what happened to him." "Is it bad that what happened to him made me way sadder than what happened to Allison?" "Does it?" "Sure does. Robin was beloved. Brought happiness to millions of people when he was in such pain himself. I felt like I personally knew the man. Allison, well, even though I spent plenty of time with her, I never really knew her. Even now, I don't have the faintest clue of who she was or what was up with her." "That's understandable. Cheating cuts so deeply because it reminds us that we didn't understand or know the person as well as we hoped we did. But that's not your fault. Let's try to get some answers. That's why I'm here," she said firmly. We arrived at the clinic about 15 minutes later. I looked at the place, unsure of what to think. On the outside, it seemed like a respectable enough place, all properly maintained and whatnot, but it still gave me the creeps. We walked inside without saying a word to each other. "Can I help you?" the proper-looking orderly manning the front desk inquired of us. I could feel her eyes lingering upon us, trying to feel us out. "Yes, we are here to see Dr. Edwin Burton," I answered her. She seemed to relax a bit at this. "Tell him Vince O'Malley is here to speak with him." "One moment, please." She stood up and hustled down a hallway and around a corner before she was out of sight. I took the moment to take the place in. The entryway was a cross between a standard hospital and a government building. It had the same white, sterile, sanitized aesthetic you get in a hospital, but right alongside that was the no-nonsense official vibe of a social services department or courthouse. It was complete with security cards, cameras, metal detectors, punch pads, and plexiglass windows. I bet everyone who works here gets plenty of smart-ass comments from their friends or whatever about their job. Personally, I bet working here wouldn't really be that much different. Most of us work with insane people at times, at least here you can identify them. As a bonus, they also give you a means of keeping them under control. Right, as if on cue, the orderly comes bustling back, the red and black lanyard holding her ID, bouncing back and forth on her chest. From this point of view, I could practically feel the fatigue coming off her in feeble waves, like the way a janitor here might wipe up a spilled liquid. Her eyes had the faraway, distant look that saw you and looked past you. Her frizzy blonde hair was partially set in a tangled knot at the base of her in a futile attempt to tame it. Her hasty steps were masking the deep fatigue that would set back in the instant she retook her seat. Always easier to remain occupied when part of you is crying out for something than to give in to the silence. Something easier said than done at times. "Go right on in." Last door to the right, open for you. I faintly saw her badge, had the name Virginia stamped on it right next to an unsmiling profile. Virginia pressed a hidden button by her station, and the door popped open for us, announcing itself with a loud click. "Thank you," I said gratefully. As we walked down the hallway, I felt the quiet reverberate around us. Sometimes nothing was more deafening than silence. I can't say how Chloe felt, but I didn't like it. I felt like an intruder wandering somewhere he didn't belong. Part of me wondered if that was what ran through Allison's head when she arrived. The other part of my mind promptly spoke up to remind me that Allison probably didn't remember her own name, much less where she was. But then, how would she have been able to get those pills inside? Time to ask someone with answers. We were finally at the door to Dr. Burton's office. I gingerly rapped on the door to announce our presence. "Come in," the quiet voice replied. He sounded just like he did on the phone. Upon crossing the threshold, I could see he was a professional-looking man in his mid-50s or early 60s, with sharply trimmed salt and pepper hair. "Dr. Burton, it's Vince. We spoke on the phone a while ago. Regarding Allison Dunbar," I stretched out my hand by way of formal introduction. He immediately grasped it and shook it firmly. "Yes, I remember. Though I must say, what brings you down here?" He straightened the double Windsor knot in his red checkered tie as he shook Chloe's hand. On the coat rack behind him was a black suit jack and a white lab coat. His office reminded me of my academic advisor in college, filled with books and papers, but still somehow created the impression of order. Order and rationality amidst chaos, the best message to send in a place like this. "This is Chloe. She knew Allison growing up. Apparently her mother would be in good company here." Dr. Burton furrowed his brow at this. "I suspected as much. It's quite common in cases like hers." "Yeah, and apparently my neighbor knew her family as well. It looks like Allison's mom made Mr. Dunbar disappear. What exactly was wrong with her?" I could hear his desk chair creak as he leaned back in it. "Well, since you are a person who was involved with her and the patient is dead, which means I can waive confidentiality, I will tell you both what I know and what I suspect." "Thank you." I wasn't expecting to be quite so relieved when he said that. "Can I get either of you coffee?" he offered as he was about to take a sip of his own cup. "No thanks. I'm good, but we appreciate you offering," Chloe agreed. "No problem. Well, here it is." Allison had some sort of psychotic breakdown not longer after the two of you broke up. She cheated on you, correct? Yes. Right. Well, here is what I know. People with underlying issues don't just one day snap for no reason. Clearly something inside Allison gave while you two were still together. The breakup merely amplified it, which is when she decided to let herself into your home and leave a little calling card. I don't need to rehash it, but all of her symptoms were that of a psychotic episode.
Right, so that's what you know.
Correct, he laced his fingers together as he sat up straighter. What is it you suspect at this? Dr. Burton stood up hastily. He quickly walked past us and looked out his office door before shutting it. When he had resumed his seat, I saw he looked uneasy. Great. When someone who deals with batshit crazy on an hourly basis looks like that, it's code for brace yourself. You heard about the man who died in a fire, I presume. Yes, when I heard my own voice, I couldn't believe it. It sounded harsh, like I had just swallowed a jar of nails or something. Well, some of us had our eye on him for a while. He would have never helped Allison get the pills to hurt herself. Quite the opposite, in fact. We suspect he was behaving inappropriately with her. He enunciated the key words slowly, like he was walking on broken glass, so each syllable was emphasized. Fucking her, Chloe offered. She was sitting stiffly in her chair in front of Dr. Burton's desk. If you didn't know better, you would think she was a patient. If it wasn't consensual, it would be sexual assault. But we have no reason to think it wasn't consensual. Let me tell you something. Working here, you have to pay attention to every minute detail. After enough time, it becomes second nature. You learn to read not just the patients, but their visitors and those who attend to them. I saw how Millstone looked at her. Plus, after she died, Millstone wasn't himself. Got it. Well, apparently someone else knows, because I just got a little something in the mail. Someone drew a hangman game with the name Daniel as the word to spell. The second time a hanging man has been left at my house. Burton looked shocked at this and didn't say anything for a few moments. I wasn't surprised. I suspect there isn't really a course for this in med school. Wow. Plus, I know he took that stuffed bear of Allison's, the one that she used to smuggle the stuff. Ah, yes. Well, I won't allow you to leave here empty-handed either. As you can imagine, we keep a very close eye on who visits here, so I shall give you the records of anyone who visited Allison in that time. Name, address, all the info you need. Thank you, that's very helpful. There is one last thing. His voice had dropped to a near whisper. Be careful. I suspect that this wasn't the first time that bear was used to smuggle something. There is a reason she was so close to that thing. Plus, you saw her apartment. She was clearly afraid of someone. I felt like I had just swallowed a wad of cotton. We will do our best. Thanks for everything, Doctor. He stood up again to shake my hand as a farewell gesture. You are welcome. It's only fair. Oh, and Vince, he added as I was about to walk out. Yes, she never once said anything bad about you here. Not once. Not when the police took her in, not when they committed her, and not once to a professional here. I had no idea how to feel about this. Okay. I couldn't really think of anything else to say. Do with it what you will. I just thought you should know. Good night. Wait, I suddenly thought of something. He paused as he was about to sit down, looking up expectantly. Yes. Where is she buried? What happened to the body? The words came out of my mouth before my mind processed what I said. Somehow, the question sounded odd to my ears. Some relative claimed the body. Her cousin, if I recall correctly. I know she was buried at the mausoleum at Heavenly Gardens. Thank you for everything, Doctor. Of course, if you need anything else, don't hesitate to call or visit. He picked up the phone and briefly instructed the front desk to give us the visitor records he mentioned earlier. With that, we walked out without saying a word. As our shoes quietly clicked on the polished floor, I was alone, my thoughts. I had never thought about what was done about Allison's body, and I had certainly never even considered what her grave was like. The woman at the front was ready for us with a handful of papers. Here you are, she politely replied as she handed them to me. Shall I buzz you out? Please. The door slid back open, I felt like we were leaving some sort of medieval castle that had just lowered the drawbridge for its visitors. "Have a good day, Virginia," bid us as we walked into the sunshine. I took a deep breath as felt the light wash over me. You don't realize how pleasant fresh air is until you are stuck breathing that chemically induced sanitized smell. A hospital or any sort of medical facility is one of two places with a distinct smell, with a shopping mall being the other. At times, there isn't much difference between the two, particularly this time of year. As someone who once worked at a department store during the holidays, people probably behave better at the psych ward. Not to mention, this place is meant to bring sanity back. The mall exists to create insanity. Clutching the papers tightly in my hand, I unlocked my car for Chloe and we drove off in silence. Not uncomfortable silence, just silence. We were both alone with our thoughts. In no time at all, I arrived back at her hotel. She looked at it for a moment before getting out. "See you soon, Vince. You know where to find me if you need me." I nodded in agreement, and she walked away. At this point, we didn't need to say much to understand what to do. Time to do some errands. Always helped me process my thoughts. I went to the grocery store to stock up on stuff. Since today was a rather challenging day, I decided I had earned a nice comfort meal. But not just any comfort meal, grilled cheese and tomato soup. Not just any grilled cheese either, because when making a legit grilled cheese, I used the same bread that I make French toast with. Just thinking about it made me feel better. After passing the greeting card section on the way to the breads, I noticed that they had one of those full-sized plastic Santas on display. After I grabbed a nice, soft, fresh loaf of brioche, I turned around and headed to the dairy. On the way, I saw the cheesy decor Santa again. While I didn't stop, I thought about it as I got the rest of the stuff I needed. Why are these things always so sketchy looking? I swear, I half expected Santa to be watching me as I walked away. We all heard the cliché urban myth about the clown statue and the babysitter growing up, but wouldn't a guy in a Santa suit be more realistic and terrifying? Creepy Santa decor aside, I always enjoyed the holidays. But to be fair, I know why people hate Christmas or Thanksgiving. Because it's the 2 days of the year where people feel they have to be something they're not: a happy spouse, a loved family member, thankful, festive, cheerful, charitable. You get the idea. No, there is so much pressure to have the perfect holiday, but when it turns out to be not possible for whatever reason, it fills you with self-loathing, bitterness, and resentment, much like my Aunt Carolyn's Yuletide fudge. Which one is more unhealthy, I am still not sure of. Relationships. Too many of them become like that Santa statue. Something you may have once found charming and fun only looks like bad taste in the end. As far as I could tell, the only difference between the sketchy Santa and Allison was that a teddy bear from the Santa would be far less likely to cause bodily injury. A smile forced its way onto my lips at the thought. That creepy stuffed thing was the perfect symbol of my relationship with Allison. A harmless-looking thing with something malignant lurking just beneath an appealing facade. Just like the thing she left outside my house when she decided to come calling that day. No wonder why toxic relationships rip at people like a chainsaw. We finally realized the whole thing was a sick joke or game, and we weren't in on the punchline. They are every asshole attempting stand-up at open mic night who somehow thinks they are humor incarnate, but everyone else just finds them obnoxious. In a toxic relationship, you start out being the rogue audience member who thinks their jokes are amazing, but slowly transform into the rest of the audience, who eventually boost the would-be comedian off stage. The only matter in question: how truly awful does the joke have to be before you decide the act is disgusting? Also, like hideous decor, you can only pretend that a person or bad relationship looks fine for so long. The moment finally comes when you cannot stand the sight of them for one more minute and are need to be rid of them. But once it is all gone, everything seems to return to normal. Now it appeared like someone was trying to playing a sick game on me. Well, I can assure you, if I wouldn't let Allison herself do it me when she was alive, someone using her in death would have about the same luck. "Thank you," I told the cashier as he finished ringing me out. I walked out of the store with my bags in hand. As I was putting them in the trunk of my car, I kept thinking. Without question, my biggest accomplishment regarding Allison is that the Halloween we were together, I managed to convince her to go as Morticia Adams when I was going as Gomez. I've always loved the Addams Family. The second Addams Family movie is perfect to watch for almost every time of year: Halloween, summer, Valentine's Day, and especially Thanksgiving. If you've seen it, you know what I mean. The shade that Wednesday Addams throws in that movie is impressive. She's your favorite relative who sits at family functions with a glass of wine that is never empty and judges people. Everyone acts like they are always so mean, yet you never fail to smirk at them. At first, Allison didn't want to go as Morticia, but that immediately changed when she saw how amazing she looked in the costume. I have to admit, that tight black dress looked spectacular on her. Perhaps she got a tad bit too into the role now that I think about it. Between the two of them, Morticia Addams won in the normal department. The entire Dunbar family put the Addams clan to shame in the creepy department. At least you would have fun with the Addams family. That always made the Addams family one of the best family dynamics to watch. The only separation between them and the so-called normal people they were thrown into situations was none of the Addams ever tried to hide who they really were. Most people have a morbid side, a hidden little thing they try not to bring out in polite company. Not only did the Addams family not try to hide theirs, they openly put it in display and reveled in it. How refreshing. It's why the thought of Allison doesn't unnerve me like it used to. Because the real her is on display at long last. Once someone can't hide or surprise you, they lose the majority of their power. For many, sanity is insanity hibernating. No, the only thing that unnerves me still is how I was asleep in bed with her for countless nights, blissfully unaware and helpless. Perhaps that's why I wanted to go as Tish and Gomez, my subconscious talking to me. Dr. Burton said she never said a bad thing about me. I guess that is supposed to mean she really cared about me or something. If that was her caring about me, I can't imagine what it would be like if she hated me. As I was driving home, I was thinking about what Dr. Burton had told me. The teddy bear might have been used to smuggle something before. How long had she been involved in stuff like this? I couldn't believe she'd have the foresight to crush pills up and hide them in a stuffed animal in case she was institutionalized, especially with her completely losing her grip. Turning onto Grunwald Street, I thought about how Mrs. Arlington heard her that day. What would have happened if she wasn't home? Or I had come home without knowing she was there. The thought chilled me more than the cold weather ever could. That mini-me was bad enough. I don't even want to think about what could have happened. Wait a minute. I haven't thought about that thing in months. After I found it, I put it aside in the garage so I wouldn't have to look at it again. I felt a weight fall into the pit of my stomach as I began to think. What if the teddy bear wasn't the first time something was hidden inside a toy? I felt my hands tighten on the steering wheel. The pace of my driving accelerated as I put my foot on the gas. I had to check that thing. Why didn't I think of this sooner? I felt my blood run cold as I remembered something else. The thing had been opened when I found it, punctured, like it had been hacked open or something. At the time, we all thought she had stabbed it or something just for the hell of it. But what if that was just so she or someone could hide something inside it? My tires screeched as I pulled into my garage. I slammed my car, the door shut, and ran into the garage. Shoving other things aside, I fumbled for where I put the stuffed Vince. After a few moments, I found it. This was beyond insane. Studying it for a second, I tried to figure out where something would be hidden. I felt around the doll's limbs, listening for the sound of paper crinkling, or the texture of something that didn't match. It took me about 2 minutes before I felt something. Right in the center of the doll, I could feel something smooth but solid. Tugging on the cuts in the doll, I ripped them open further. Tossing the stuffing aside, I found what was hidden. A small, black plastic cylinder approximately the size of your pinky finger. A flash drive. I felt myself swallow harshly. Allison, or whoever was here that day, wasn't just randomly here to trash the place. That's why nothing else had been touched. I was rushing back inside my house, shoving the flash drive into my computer. I had no idea what to expect. There could be literally anything on here. I felt my fingers drumming themselves impatiently on the keyboard. I silently cursed it to load faster. The folder popped upon on my screen. There wasn't any real concrete names for files, just a few marked with numbers going from 1 to 10. I clicked the first one and saw it contained a video file. I pressed play and my computer went into its full-screen video player setting. I took a deep breath and braced myself for whatever. The first thing I saw was a shot of Allison's bedroom. From what I could tell, I was viewing things through her computer's webcam. Because it was sitting on the dresser, I had a clear shot of almost the whole room. As soon as I realized what I was looking at, a blur came rushing into the room. The occupant herself. Funny, the last time I saw Allison was through a camera. Except this time she wasn't alone. She was making out with some guy. Now, I don't mean they were kissing, I'm talking hardcore, trying to suck each other faces off, roaming hands and all. The last time I saw that kind of face sucking was when I watched Alien. I felt my skin grow hot. This couldn't be what I thought this was. But it was. Within what seemed like seconds, they were doing it. I couldn't stand calling it anything else. I felt like I was vibrating out of my skin. Clearly, the two of them were having a wonderful time. I felt my hand slam down on the keyboard and stop the footage. Unbelievable. The little bitch just couldn't just cheat on me, harass me, and generally intrude on my life. She actually had to film it and show it to me. I felt myself walk to the kitchen, my shoes slapping the linoleum. A blast of cool air greeted me as I opened the freezer. The ice cubes felt soothing on my burning skin as I dumped them into a glass, then poured a healthy amount of whiskey on top. For every occasion, there is a drink that goes well with it: champagne for celebration, wine for date night, beer for a chill night out, and whiskey for when you just need a good stiff drink. As I tossed it back, my throat burned. I bet this would be one of the cases the cops use for stories whenever someone asked about the craziest things they've seen on the job. I could see it now, late night, dinner at some overpriced family restaurant, feeling nice and mellow after a few beers. Hey, you know that guy whose crazy ex-girlfriend broke into his house and all she left him was some stuffed toy that looked like him? Well, turns out inside was a flash drive of a video with her fucking another guy. That's the one to beat, folks. Fuck after school special. My life was an after dinner special. I should be on one of those Lifetime specials about love gone wrong. I should look into it, maybe make a few bucks. As I poured myself another drink, I began to feel bitterness waking inside of me, like an animal that had been hibernating. Part of me was also pissed off that the guy was good looking. She didn't even do me the favor of banging a guy who was a step down from me. At least I could have gotten an ego trip that she downgraded. But who was I kidding? She wasn't considerate in life. Why would she start now that she's dead? I got in touch with the cops and told them what I found. After watching that, I felt absolutely filthy. Just looking at that made me feel like walking into my shower and scrubbing off a layer of skin. The police arrived mercifully soon after I called them. In the meantime, I texted Chloe about what I found. Out in front of my duplex was a single squad car. A suited detective climbed out of the driver's seat. "Thank you for calling us, Vince," he said with an outstretched hand. "I'm Detective Ramsey." I grasped it briefly before leading him inside. "No problem, Detective. Just get this out of my sight." I thrust the drive and mini Vince at him. He was a middle-aged, wiry man with green eyes that reminded me of a tie I once owned. A mild green, the kind that looks nice as icing on someone's birthday cake. "Happy viewing. I know that had to be rough to see, but we'll go through everything. If we find anything, we will keep you posted." "I appreciate that. Yeah, officially we consider Allison's death a suicide. No one is disputing that. But we do consider the circumstances of her death to be of interest." "Yeah. Yes. We have everything you've told us, and we know about the paramedic. We are pursuing all leads, but we don't have much. If you find or hear anything else, give me a heads up." He handed me a business card that I put inside my wallet. "What do you think about him? A paramedic who knows several languages and gets infatuated with a patient? Yeah, we definitely think there is more to it than that." "Did you get the stuffed bear?" "Sure did. When ran tests on it, we confirmed it contained residue of oxycodone, the same drug in Allison's system when she died. You mentioned she had a history of substance issues." "Yup. Which substance or substances specifically?" "Heroin and general opiates. As far as I know for sure, Ramsay jotted efficiently in his notebook. I'm gonna level with you, Vince. I think the medic and Allison may have known each other before. It was no coincidence she was committed to that hospital. Why I felt my throat tighten uncomfortably as he spoke. Heroin. Paramedic would be in an amazing position to get stash. Around here, paramedics deal with heroin about as regularly as heart attacks anymore. Hell, he wouldn't be the first to succumb to it. Far from out, it would also explain why Millstone paid close attention to her and why he made sure to get the stuffed bear. You think there was more in there than what Allison took? Very good observation. That's exactly what we suspect. Millstone lives in a nice house, on a paramedic's salary, and his wife is a stay-at-home mom. Interesting. It is also worth noting that he died in a fire without a trace of a break-in or anything. Do you think she had anything to do with it? Allison or Mrs. Millstone? At this point, either. It's possible. Mrs. Millstone herself is more likely than anything Allison related. At least so far. Insurance money is one motive, not to mention she probably knew about her husband and Allison, or suspected it. I don't need to tell you how infidelity can be sensed if not actively known about. He was right about that. Not to mention bringing home a teddy bear from a dead girl. Well, yeah, there is that. He may have also just wanted a token of grief or something. But that's all I have for now, Vince. I'll see myself out. Before I knew it, he was walking through the front door and I was by myself again. I felt exhausted, like all of the nonsense of the last few months finally caught up with me. That was the Allison I remembered. Not some shell of girl who was insane and drugged out of her mind. We were slowly getting answers to questions we had all been trying to figure out. When you think about it, our romantic prospects are mysteries we hope to solve. Who is she? Does she have a boyfriend? Does she like me dating is nothing more than an attempt to answer those questions, and many more we might never get an answer to. But we want the answers bad enough that we keep seeking an answer. Now, if you have the privilege of having us so be unfaithful, the appeal to play detective only gets stronger. So many people can't resist obsessively looking up the other woman or whatever on social media, frantically trying to see what they look like. Back during the Cold War, there were experts on the Soviet Union called Kremlinologists who would carefully study every single picture and speech of the top officials, taking careful notes of who was in the picture, who gave the longest speech, what speech got the loudest applause, who sat with who, and who seemed to be missing. All of this was in the hope of figuring out where the true power resided. In this day and age, using social media when it comes to dating is a lot like that. Except now people obsess over what guy's photo their fiancé liked and make a flirty comment on. The sad thing is, that's usually just a warm-up. What usually follows is going through their so's phone, eavesdropping on their conversations, and micro-analyzing their every waking moment. This can happen even in relationships where both partners are faithful. When I found out about Allison and whatever his name was, I didn't care who it was with. The only thing that mattered was it wasn't me. Looking into it can only drive you crazy with more questions you will probably never answer, the most common one being why them. I never even asked for the guy's name. Hell, I didn't even know if that guy from the video was him, or just another name in a long line of guys. Either way, it doesn't make much difference to me. It fucking sucks either way. Before I knew it, there was a knock at the door. Walking lazily towards it, I saw Chloe on the other side of the peephole. Interesting. I didn't ask her to come by. When I opened the door, she didn't say a word, but her eyes screamed, "Holy shit. I am so sorry, sweetie." I also noticed she was holding a large pizza box. The perfect gift for any occasion. "I got garlic bread too," she said while gesturing with the pizza. Cheesy. Mina, damn right I felt slightly more fond of her in that moment. This quiet little mercy meant more to me than I ever expected. We sat down on the couch and watched old episodes of Arrested Development. Chloe didn't say a word, but sat quietly beside me and made herself comfortable. It was nice. After stuffing my face, I felt considerably better. After 3 episodes, I felt myself shifting on the couch towards her. Why exactly do you care about what happened to Allison? Better yet, how do you have the time to stay out here? Chloe sat with her legs folded underneath her. She adjusted herself slightly on the couch before answering. Like Allison's family, I grew up pretty comfortable. My family owns the patents for a number of pesticides, along with some real estate. All I've ever really done is what I was supposed to do. Go to the right schools, mingle with the right people, date who I was supposed to date, work within the family network. But it never made me happy. Not that it ever makes anyone really happy. I guess I feel like I failed Allison like I'm failing myself all along. I think a lot of people failed her. For the first time, I feel like I am doing something meaningful. Gotcha, another rich girl. Wasn't sure how I felt about that. I wonder if Allison was only friends with her because she is rich. Wouldn't surprise me one. Was I one? I didn't elaborate, but I could tell she knew what I was asking. No, Vince. She was damn lucky to have you for as long as she did, and what she did is unforgivable. I swallowed thickly at that. While people have told me that countless times, this one felt different, more real. Thank you, I smiled at her. I can't remember if I've ever smiled at Chloe since I met her. I made a mental note to do it more. Just the truth, she said quietly. Tell me more about the Dunbars, I began after a pause. What about them? Everything you know. Hell, I don't think I've even asked you where you are from. How rude of me. It's okay, she added quickly. I don't blame you. I did sort of butt into your life unexpectedly because of a crazy situation. She brushed a few crumbs off her jeans. I couldn't help but notice how tight her jeans were. It was a good look for her. I am sorry about that. Don't worry about it. Without you, I would still be in the dark about a lot of stuff. That's kind of you to say. No worries. So where exactly are you from? Maple Bluffs. It's just outside of St. Louis. Nice place. It was once, she emphasized it with a forlorn look. Years ago, it was a tranquil little town. Now it's a pale imitation of its former self. Has one of the highest heroin rates in the state. Part of town is still nice. The other, though, not so much. Pity. What else do you know about Mr. and Mrs. Dunbar? They were your old school husband and wife. Mrs. Dunbar never really held a job as far as I know. Didn't have to. Allison's grandfather was a doctor. The family also owned a newspaper and a meatpacking plant, amongst other things. The paper was called the Guilford Gazette. They sold it a long time ago, so that explains Allison's fixation with gossip. Yep. But that's not to say Mrs. Dunbar was just some bland housewife. Not even close. She was the woman all other women in town turned to. I can still remember her holding court in that old wicker chair on their front porch. Sweaty glass of tea or lemonade in her hand, clutching it with her burgundy nail polish. When she would gesture, the ice would clink away in the glass to the rhythm of whatever she was saying. Oh, I cannot wait to get started on the bake sale. Clink, clink. What else? She was the chair of the women's committee and was on the PTA. She was known in town as the Duchess. Not to her face, of course. Of course not. But it suited her. She had the ladies in waiting to go with it. Her little bake sale clique. Joanne Halliday, Cindy McGinn, and Barb Fields. You wanted something done within the women of town. You had to have their say, or else. Charming. Oh yeah, they were a pair. My mom hated them all. Probably still hates them, in fact. Mrs. Dunbar even had the cliché creepy China doll collection. I bet the dolls weren't even close to the creepiest thing in that house. I rolled my eyes at this. Don't tell me she tried dressing Allison like them. Afraid so, she gave me a what can you do shrug, sadly. I wish I could say that surprised me, but that didn't work out well at all. Allison threw a fit about it, and the next thing I knew, Mrs. Dunbar sold all the dolls. Good for her. Finally, something I can agree with her on. Yup. But you get the idea. Parents living vicariously through their children. Different generation, same bullshit, exactly. She may not be homecoming queen or whatever the town has anymore, but her daughter is. That's totally the same thing, right? Totally. Of all the things I've learned about Allison, this was by far the least surprising. I am surprised she didn't marry a man like her father. Why, I had no idea if she was talking about me. Because I swear, any doctor could make their entire practice off Mrs. Dunbar. Every time you saw her, she had either just finished some checkup or was about to have one. Mrs. Dunbar would fuss over Allison about everything. Make sure you put on the sunscreen, sweetie, or don't eat too much salt. It makes you bloated, honey. That kind of thing. There is one of those per family. I felt relieved that she was talking about Allison's grandfather. I know. Especially considering she was a doctor's daughter. An old school one too. Auk. Can't imagine how Daddy worried about every little cough or cold. Faking it to get out of school is out of the question. Yeah, but I think the status made up for it in the end. Not to mention plenty of pills. She gave a silent nod of agreement. We sat there a little while longer before it was Chloe's turn to ask a question. How did you feel when you found out about Allison and the other guy? That wasn't the question I was expecting at first, but I wasn't surprised either. Angry at first, but then just blah. Not depression, just hollowed out. Empty. Why she crossed one leg over the other and leaned on the couch with her shoulder, facing me, because deep down, I was always surprised she was with me. Too good to be true. She ran a hand through her hair, sweeping it behind her with one deft wave. Sort of, but it was deeper. It was like something you enjoy in the moment but can feel it coming to an end. Know what I mean? I do. I just wish it hadn't ended quite like that. Of course you do. Did you learn anything from being with Allison though? Relationships are like jobs. You take a little something with you from each one. Whether you realize it or not, this is very true. Some are better than others. The little inside joke on people is that you really can't assess a relationship and its impact on you until it's all over. Hell, sometimes it takes years. But when you think about it, that makes sense. It's like a movie. You can't give a final objective look until it is over and you can study the whole thing. Sometimes you might need to watch it more than once. So what is your final objective look on Allison? Which Allison? Chloe looked at me puzzled. What do you mean? I mean which Allison? The one I first met, the one who cheated on me, or the one who wound up in the hospital? That's my verdict. I like the Allison I first met, but she didn't last. That was just a pleasant facade for deeper issues. That's fair. She cleared her throat and leaned back on a pillow. She had major issues. It just took a little while for them to come out. That's right. People who are truly happy never use drugs. You see all these rich assholes who take drugs. It may give you a hint it's because deep down, they're miserable. They pretend they are happy, but get rid of the facade and it's all a front. People take illegal drugs for the same reason they take legal drugs, because something isn't working right. It's just a matter of what? A drug. Addiction is just a symptom of that. Good point. I've seen it all the time at work. I have yet to find a truly happy person who developed a drug addiction. It's why deep down I wasn't surprised Allison cheated on me. Cheating is the same thing. People who are truly happy and content in life will never be unfaithful. It's just a matter of what makes someone do that. It's why we all have a limit. All of us have the potential to be unfaithful. It's just a matter of what makes us do it. She had sat up straight at this and took a drink of the bottle of water beside her on the coffee table. Absolutely, Chloe was spot on. You know, that's what always bothered me most. What she had rolled up the sleeves of her soft purple sweater and had rested her arms on her legs. I never knew exactly why she cheated on me. What motivated it? The best I always got was it was the same reason she got into drugs, which was Chloe was looking at me. But she wasn't focusing on me alone. She had that look where you are thinking about more than the topic at hand, but I continued on. There was something going on that compelled her. Some need or urge she was trying to satisfy. Same reason people get prescriptions from the doctor. There is something going on that they can't address themselves, so they seek out something that can. Interesting association between addiction and bad relationship. What makes you think they are different? Think about it. Once you're with an addict, you are with someone who is eternally unfaithful. They go behind your back for a cheap thrill. It may be with a flesh and blood person, a hypodermic needle, slot machine, a bottle, or a line of white powder. Doesn't really matter what. It's all the same idea though. An addict's most important relationship is with their addiction. Unless that changes, you will always be second to that. They will always be unfaithful to you. Chloe was now looking straight down at her feet as I spoke. Can't argue with that. Addiction is the ultimate abusive relationship. Yeah. The ups and downs of dating are like a drug in the aftermath. When you're up, but when down, you are truly down. An up and downer rolled into one. Her gaze still hadn't moved from her feet. In all the time I've known Chloe, I don't think I've ever heard her talk about herself before tonight. Not once. Time for that to change and change fast. Who was it? I asked as gently as I could. Who was what that got her attention? She looked up and seemed so sad it broke my heart. The addict, it was a statement, not a question. She sat in silence. I could practically feel the emotions surging through her, fighting for release. Do I tell him? Should I lie? I was just about to drop it when she finally answered. My father, I think she was telling herself as much as me. Do you want to talk about it? I took a step towards her. Chloe took a deep breath in, like she was bracing herself for a collision or something. Let me put it this way, living my house was sort of what I imagined living in a haunted house would be like. You can feel the malevolence always lurking, just waiting to make itself known, but you never quite know when it's going to jump out and get you. That's horrible. I had seen plenty of those movies myself. While I certainly enjoyed watching them, I can't ever say I'd want to temporarily be in one, much less experience it on a daily basis. I felt myself slide over close to her on the couch. Before I knew it, I had placed my arm around her and was rubbing circles into her elbow. I had never seen Allison act even remotely as vulnerable as this girl. I felt awful seeing her like this, but it was nice to see a real human being. Thanks, she offered me quietly. She scooted a little closer to me without saying another word. Before I knew it, I had drifted off to sleep. I woke up slowly the next morning. At first, I forgot where I was, but when I realized Chloe was still asleep next to me, I remembered what happened. The clock under my TV said 11:03 a.m. While trying not to wake her, I got up and got my phone. I wanted to call and update Dr. Burton. I got him on the third ring. Hi, Dr. Burton. Why hello, Vince. His polite tone greeted me. I just wanted to give you an update. Inside the stuffed mini-me Allison left at my house was a flash drive. On it was footage of her fucking another guy. The silence on the call reverberated for several seconds. I imagined him sitting stunned at his desk. I am so sorry, Vince. He sounded so sympathetic. I had never heard him use that tone before. From his tone, you would have thought he personally failed me as a patient. Thanks. It is what it is. Vince. Yeah. Have you ever heard of oxytocin? You mean OxyContin? No, oxytocin. Can't say that I have. Well, oxytocin is a hormone your body makes. It's connected to feelings of love, sex, affection, and everything in between. Cool, I was wondering why he was telling me this, but part of me suspected he had a reason. It's called the love hormone and is key to all forms of human bonding, especially physical affection. You aren't the first person to confuse it to OxyContin. It's spelled very similar. That is uncanny. The love hormone is spelled almost identical to an addictive pain pill. I know. Creepy. Although you could say the love hormone can be its own addictive drug. Good point. Just like heroin is spelled almost the same as heroin. One letter, but a hell of a lot of difference. I've always found that unsettling myself. Allison could have been a heroine, but she turned to heroin. Indeed. I couldn't help her, her father couldn't help her, and not even Danny Millstone could help her. End of story. That is why I mentioned it, Vince. In my professional opinion, Allison suffered from a lack of proper development, coping skills, and sincere human relationships. I can't confirm it, but since her grandfather was a doctor, and from my research had legal issues with morphine, odds are good the issue was hereditary based. That is helpful. Plus, those with mental illness are quite susceptible to fall into addictive behaviors. So she was in double trouble, as it were. Family history of both mental illness and substance abuse. Yeah, that's right. I just wanted you to know it wasn't your fault. I tried to help Allison too, but failed. I had never thought of that before. Dr. Burton had lost a patient. I suddenly felt an odd sympathy for the guy. Don't be too hard on yourself, Doc. I guess we got something in common. We do indeed. He sounded somehow more familiar to me now. Perhaps he felt the same. Call me if you need anything else. Will do, Doc. Talking to Dr. Burton actually made me feel better. While I guess he is a psychiatrist, it still took me by surprise somehow. Funny, because not much managed to do that anymore. He had a solid point too. Love can often be found at the heart of most despicable things, but it's usually a love of something rather than someone. Love of money, love of power, love of sex, love of drugs, and oftentimes love of violence. In my experience, most substitute love of something for love of someone. Just look at what people do when they go through a bad breakup. Binge on ice cream along with some type of alcohol. Perhaps throw in a hasty one-night stand. And you got the idea. I went into the kitchen and began making some breakfast. It was a cereal kind of day. Before I could decide on what kind, I heard my phone ring again on the table. Hello, Vince? It's Detective Ramsey. Oh, hey, Detective. I braced myself for whatever news he had. Just wanted to give you an update on what we found on the flash drive. Shoot, well, there was a lot more to that recording than just what you saw. It seems after they had sex, things got a little rougher between Allison and him. A lot rougher. How much rougher? The guy ended up dead. They were fighting and he got rough with her. Tried choking her and everything. She fought back and got the best of him. We actually found the body a while ago. One of our cold cases that we can now mark solved. So whatever you might think of finding that footage, you should be happy to help solve the case. I felt the blood rushing to my ears and the room suddenly felt 20 degrees warmer. I guess that is something I somehow managed to say. The guy in question was Josh Marshall. Rap sheet goes on for a mile. Lots of drug-related stuff. Shocker, I know. That's even how their fight started. We had a professional tech guy break down the audio and the argument began over drugs. Specifically over them paying for their most recent score. Charming. I guess the couple that scores together whores together. I felt a faint bit of pride over that rhyme. You have a point there. But there's plenty more where that came from. It appears Allison had some outstanding financial obligations. That's no surprise. The girl had no head for it. I'm amazed the bar she ran didn't go out of business. Not to mention good drugs are pricey. It was deeper than that. According to her bank records, she was withdrawing money at a suspicious rate. What are you telling me? You said she was cheating on you, didn't deny it, and got defensive when you confronted her. That's right. Who the fuck was I to tell her what to do or something like that? Well, Vince, I don't think she was cheating on you just for the hell of it. I felt like my hands tightening into fists at my sides. Okay, ... So why did she do it exactly? There's no easy way to say it, but we think Allison may have taken up a new side venture. Either prostitution or drug dealing. No way, believe me, I had thought of Allison as a whore plenty of times, but this was insane. She had actually become a hooker. The other option is that she was supplying his habit, and they just hooked up for the hell of it. Personally, I tend to suspect that more. I would have to agree. I can see that way more easily than the hooker one. I always thought her guy on the side was the one giving her drugs. It's understandable, Vince Ramsey reassured me. But where was she getting it? You know she managed a bar, right? Yeah, what about it? I did some digging, and the bar is actually owned by her family. No shit, I have it right here in front of me. Clara Dunbar is the registered owner. I felt like I just walked headfirst through ice. How I heard myself breath into the phone. I don't know, but I promise you I'll find out. Detective. Detective. Yes, Vince, a note of genuine concern filtered into his voice. Do you think someone deliberately tried to drive Allison crazy? Or it was just guilt over Josh? The silence on the other end lasted longer than I thought. I even looked at the phone to make sure Ramsey was still on the line. I've considered that myself. Since both Allison and a paramedic known to be familiar with her are both dead on account of, shall we say, odd circumstances, I think it's a good possibility. But why? That is the million-dollar question, Vince. Does it have something to do with that bear? Yes, I think so. His voice had dropped to a low whisper. It's one of the things that linked them. What can I do? I do. Keep your eyes and ears open and your mouth shut. I'm gonna do some looking into that hospital and see if anyone else catches my attention. I'm also looking into Allison's friends and other acquaintances. Sounds good. One last thing, and be honest, his voice had dropped to the point where it was almost inaudible. Did she try to strangle or do anything else to you? No, nothing like that. Oh, good. Because if she did, I wouldn't want you to feel the slightest hesitation telling me. This girl had major issues. I appreciate that. And you got that right. Very good. Eyes open and I'll keep you posted. Stay safe, Vince. You too, detective. There it was. She had actually killed someone. I sat there in silence for a few moments. All this time I wondered what Allison was actually capable of, and now I had an answer. I was torn. Part of me knew it had been in self-defense, but yet she had invited that scumbag into her life to begin with. She had to have known what he was like. I suddenly remembered what they found at her apartment. The words, "He's coming for me," all over the place. Was she worried about someone coming to avenge Josh or something? Ramsey had a point. If someone was deliberately trying to make Allison go insane, they had to have a motive, although I doubt she needed much assistance in the going insane department. As I was about to get up, I remembered that Ramsey didn't say when the guy died. I felt my heart plummet like a cinder block that was just dropped off a cliff. That footage was left here months ago, meaning she had to kill that guy sometime before she let herself in. I had no idea if Josh was killed before Allison, and I officially ended it, after or any time in between. Was that why she, or someone tried contacting me? She could have wanted anything. A hand to get rid of the body, perhaps. That would have been one hell of a conversation. Hey baby, I know we're broken up or whatever, but I could really use your help with something. Chloe was moving on the couch. I could hear its worn leather moving as she shifted and raised herself. I turned to face her, unsure of what exactly to say. What's up? She looked at me. Allison. She killed that guy I saw her with on the video. Some low-level drug guy who tried to strangle her. Was on the books a cold case for a while. She sat there silently. I could practically hear the thoughts racing through her head. We need to go see Mrs. Millstone, she offered out of nowhere after what seemed like forever. Let's don't, and say we did. I began to move back towards the kitchen. Do you not want to? Chloe sounded puzzled. What gave it away? As I turned back around, I felt moody all of a sudden. All Chloe did was look at me. Can't say that I do. I know it's not exactly the most appealing task, but to find out what happened to Allison, we need to know what happened with him. I am fucking sick and tired of Allison. I felt myself explode. I broke up with her to get away from her and her bullshit. I was done with it and ready to move on with my life. But does she let me? Haha, the laughter was caustic and harsh even to my ears. I wish. It's been worse than ever. You know what? I had a life before Allison and I will have a life after her. But all you know me and anyone else knows me as anymore is as the guy Allison was dating. I'm sick of it. Chloe looked stunned at my outburst. They love to describe anger as the color red, seeing red. But anger isn't red. Red is a warm, content color, full of life. A fixer-upper. If anything, black is more akin to anger, lifeless, dominating, all-consuming. I felt my chest heaving up and down. I looked at Chloe again, and she looked sad. Now I felt bad. She was a good person who I liked and didn't deserve that. I'm sorry, I mumbled out. I felt ashamed at my outburst. She didn't say a word but came over and wrapped me up in a hug. At first, I sort of flinched at her touch. Then, I found her embrace comforting, all-consuming, like a hot bath after a horrible day at work. It's okay. I've been expecting that for a long time. We are going out, you and me. No Allison allowed. That sounds amazing. I'll pick you up at 6 and we'll go to a movie, then grab some food. I'll be ready, she smiled widely. I think that is the first time I've seen her genuinely happy since I've met her.